The last transmission from Station Hyperion arrived on a Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday at 89 degrees north, where the sun had not set in 41 days and time had begun to feel like a suggestion rather than a fact. Dr. Mara Solberg read it 3 times standing in the narrow corridor of the Norwegian research vessel Fenrir, the hum of the engines vibrating through the soles of her boots. The message was 9 words long. Do not come north. The ice here is not ice. It was signed by Dr. Emil Voss, her mentor, her predecessor, the man who had spent 30 years studying polar magnetism and had never once in all that time sent a message that didn't read like a grant proposal. Careful, measured, deeply, profoundly dull. This was not that. She looked out the porthole. The Arctic Ocean stretched in every direction, a crumpled sheet of white and steel gray, fractured by dark leads of open water that looked like cracks in old porcelain. Somewhere ahead, 300 kilometers beyond the last coordinates she had for Hyperion, something had changed. She folded the printout and put it in her breast pocket close to her heart. Then she went to find the captain. Captain Birte Halvorsen was a compact, unsmiling woman of 53 who had navigated these waters for 20 years and claimed to have seen everything the Arctic could produce. Rogue waves, polar cyclones, a pod of bowhead whales singing in frequencies low enough to feel in the chest like a second heartbeat. "We continue," Mara said. Birte looked at her for a long moment. "Your man Voss said—" "I know what he said. We continue." Another silence. Outside, an ice floe groaned against the hull, a sound like a cathedral settling. "The GPS has been drifting," Birte said finally. "Since this morning, I wasn't going to mention it until we had more data." "Drifting how?" "Placing us about 40 kilometers west of where the instruments say we are. Maybe more. It's not consistent." She paused. "And the compass? You know, at these latitudes, the magnetic compass is basically decorative. But I've been watching the gyro compass. It's been hesitating, just slightly, like something is pulling at it." Mara felt the hair rise on her forearms. "Since when?" "Since we crossed 87 degrees north." They looked at each other. The ship groaned again. "We continue," Mara said. The change happened at 89 degrees 54 minutes north. Mara was on deck when the fog came. Not ordinary Arctic fog, which arrives in banks, slow and predictable. This came in a single exhalation, as if the ocean itself had breathed out, and within 40 seconds the visibility had dropped to less than 10 meters. The temperature plunged 7 degrees in under a minute. One of the junior researchers, a Finnish glaciologist named Pekka, pressed his gloved hand against the railing and then pulled it away sharply. "The metal," he said. His voice was strange. Mara looked. Where Pekka's glove had touched the railing, the steel had changed color, not frosted. She knew the appearance of frost, the crystalline bloom of it. This was different. The metal had gone a deep, iridescent blue-black, like a raven's wing or a bruise caught in sunlight, and the color was spreading slowly outward from the contact point in thin filaments like frost, but not frost. "Don't touch it," Mara said. Nobody moved. The fog pressed around them, and in the fog there was a sound, or not exactly a sound, a vibration felt rather than heard, low and rhythmic and patient, like the pulse of something very large and very old that had been waiting for a long, long time. Then the fog thinned, and they saw what lay ahead. They had expected ice, the Arctic polar cap, a continent of frozen ocean, permanent and absolute, the hard white crown of the world. What they found instead was open water, not the patchy seasonal melt leads they had been navigating for days. Open water, stretching in every direction beyond the bow, calm as glass, perfectly flat, so dark it appeared almost black. It reflected the pale sky with an impossible clarity, so that standing at the prow of the Fenrir, Mara felt she was looking down into an inverted version of the world, a mirror sky that had no bottom. And at the center of this open sea, perhaps 10 kilometers ahead, perhaps less, was land. It was not on any chart. It was not possible. A coastline of black rock, low and jagged, rose from the water without ceremony. Behind it, a landscape of impossible green, vegetation lush and dense, steaming faintly in the cold air as though alive with inner heat. And behind the vegetation rising into the low Arctic sky were structures, not natural formations, not pressure ridges or ice towers or anything the geology of the planet could reasonably explain. Structures, towers perhaps, or the ruins of towers. It was difficult to tell from this distance. They were dark, and they rose at angles that seemed slightly wrong, slightly off plumb, as though they had been built by something that understood vertical differently than humans did. Pekka made a sound that was not quite a word. Birta said very quietly, "Mother of God." Mara said nothing. She was already thinking of Voss, of his 9-word message, of the 30 years he had spent studying the magnetic anomalies at the pole, the irregularities in the geomagnetic field that science had always attributed to the behavior of the liquid iron core far below. The ice here is not ice. She had assumed he meant something was wrong with Hyperion, that the station had been compromised, that the ice beneath it had shifted, that there was structural damage. She understood now that he had been trying, in 9 words, to describe something that had no words. They anchored in the black water and took the inflatable tender to shore. Mara, Pekka, and a third crew member, Daniel, a Faroes marine biologist who had volunteered with a calm that Mara found either admirable or alarming. Birta stayed on the Fenrir with instructions to transmit a full position report every 30 minutes and to leave. Leave immediately. Leave without them if necessary, if contact was lost for more than 2 hours. The shore was black volcanic rock, slick with something that was not quite water, thicker, slightly luminescent at the edges where it gathered in the tidal crevices, pulsing very faintly with a light the color of deep bioluminescence. Mara crouched and studied it. She did not touch it. The vegetation beyond the shoreline was extraordinary. Enormous ferns, their fronds a green so deep it was almost black, interspersed with flowering plants unlike anything in any botanical catalog she had ever seen. Pale blooms the size of dinner plates, their petals arranged in patterns that seemed to shift when she looked at them directly, resolving into something almost like script, and then dissolving again. The air was warm, not slightly warm, not comparatively warm given the Arctic context, warm the way a greenhouse is warm or a living body is warm, a pervasive, enveloping heat that seemed to come from the ground itself. They moved in silence. The sound, the vibration, the deep, patient pulse was stronger here. Mara could feel it in her teeth. She found the first body 20 minutes from the shore. It was Dr. Emil Voss, and he was alive. He was sitting at the base of one of the towers. Up close, they were unmistakably architectural, built from blocks of the same black stone as the coastline, but shaped with a precision that was not geological. With his back against the stone and his eyes open, he was not dead, but he was not exactly present. He was muttering, a continuous low murmur, words blurring into one another. Mara knelt in front of him and took his face in her hands. Emil. His eyes moved to her, something crossed his face, recognition, and then something she had no name for, something like grief, or like the particular expression a person makes when they have learned something they cannot unlearn. "Mara," he said. His voice was hoarse as though he had been talking for a very long time. "You shouldn't be here. What happened to you? Where's the rest of your team?" He blinked slowly. "They went inside." A pause. "I couldn't follow them. I sat here instead. I've been sitting here for—" He stopped, looked at the pale sky. "I don't know how long. The time doesn't work here." "Emil, what is this place?" He was quiet for so long she thought he hadn't heard her. Then he said, "I've been wrong. About the magnetic anomalies, about all of it. For 30 years I've been measuring the data and constructing models, and I had one explanation. The core, the mantle, the standard model. But the anomalies weren't coming from below." He looked up at the tower behind him. They were coming from here. Mara sat back on her heels. Around them, the enormous ferns moved in a breeze that she could not feel. "There's a field generated by this place," Voss continued. Not electromagnetic in any sense I can properly categorize. Something else, something that operates on different principles. It's been suppressing the polar ice for possibly thousands of years, maybe longer. This open sea, this land, it's always been here. We just couldn't reach it because the field makes navigation impossible beyond a certain latitude. The compass drift, the GPS errors, that's not malfunction. That's the field working exactly as intended. The word hit her hard. Intended, she said. Intended by whom? Voss looked at her with those haunted eyes. Go and look inside, he said, and then come back and tell me if whom is the right question. The entrance to the tower was an opening in the stone, roughly 3 meters high and shaped like an elongated ellipse, not quite the shape a human hand would carve, but not entirely alien either. Inside, the walls were covered in the same markings she had seen on the flower petals, carved deep into the black stone and filled with the luminescent liquid from the tide pools so that the interior glowed with soft blue-white light. The carvings were records. She understood that immediately, in the way you understand a library even before you can read any of the books, the scale of it, the care of it, the sheer accumulating weight of information, walls of it, floor to ceiling, stretching down a corridor that went much further than the exterior dimensions of the tower should have allowed. Daniel, who had spent years studying cetacean communication, stopped dead 10 meters in. These aren't random marks, he said. No. There's grammar here, repetition of units, nesting structures. He pressed close to the wall without touching it. This is a language. Yes, Mara said. Who wrote it? She walked further down the corridor. The light pulsed with the same slow rhythm as the pulse she had been feeling in her chest since they crossed into the black water. It occurred to her now, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that she hadn't been hearing a heartbeat. She had been synchronizing with one. At the end of the corridor, the passage opened into a chamber. She stopped breathing. The chamber was vast, impossibly, structurally improbably vast, a cathedral space inside a tower that from the outside had appeared no wider than a townhouse. The ceiling arched hundreds of meters overhead, and in the arching ceiling there was no stone. There was only light, a perfect, steady, golden light, sourceless, the light of a sun that was not the sun. And in the light, suspended without any visible means of support, were shapes, dozens of them, hundreds, each one roughly the size and general outline of a human body, but made of the same luminescent material as the tide pools and the carvings and the flower petals. They hung in the golden air like specimens in amber, like seeds in a pod, like notes in a chord held forever on the edge of resolution. They were breathing. She could see the slow rise and fall of it, the deep, patient, unhurried respiration of things that had been sleeping for a very long time and were not yet ready to wake. From behind her, she heard Pekka's voice, barely a whisper. What do we do? Maus seat sees the guy for Saint Fris. Die fit seats. She found the answer on her way back out. On the wall near the entrance, set apart from the other carvings and bordered by the deepest cut marks in all the stone, was a single sequence of symbols. It was different from the surrounding text. Older, she thought, or not older exactly, but prior, fundamental, the kind of thing you put at the beginning. Daniel studied it for a long time. I think, he said carefully, the way scientists say things they are not remotely certain about, it's a condition, an if-then, like a contract clause. What does it say? He was quiet. Outside, distantly, she could hear the black water lapping at the volcanic shore. She could feel the pulse of the sleepers in the chamber, slow and enormous, filling the warm air. I think it says, Daniel said, when the ice is gone, we return. Mara sat with Voss on the black rock and watched the pale Arctic sun wheel overhead without setting. Pekka and Daniel were back on the Fenrir. She had told Birta to keep the engines warm. How long have they been in there? She asked. Longer than we've been a species, Voss said. He sounded neither afraid nor awed. He sounded, she thought, like a man who has run out of the capacity for either. Maybe much longer. The field, the thing I've been calling the anomaly, it's a timer and a guardian. It keeps the ice in place. It keeps us from finding this. And it runs on the ice. The magnetic energy of a frozen polar cap sustained over geological time is a power source we've never imagined and wouldn't know how to measure if we tried. But the ice is going, she said. He nodded, said nothing. The melt, the warming. We've lost 30% of the summer cap in 40 years. The field is weakening, Voss said. That's what I've been measuring. That's what all the anomaly data is, not the core shifting, the guardian losing power, the timer running down. He paused. They designed it to last as long as the ice lasted. They didn't design it for us. She thought about that for a long time. Do they know? She said. The ones inside, do they know it's almost time? I think that's what the pulse is, he said. I think they're beginning to hear the alarm. It is misty chat of freeze. On the journey back south, the fog returned once more and then lifted, and suddenly the GPS was resolute, and the gyro compass held steady north, and the black water was gone, replaced by the familiar fractured white of the polar ice cap, diminished, retreating, visibly less than it had been even the last time she had been in these waters 3 years ago. Mara stood at the bow and thought about the inscription. When the ice is gone, we return. She thought about the chamber, and the hundreds of slow-breathing shapes, and the golden, sourceless light, and the profound patience of something that had waited through entire ice ages for a condition it had perhaps not expected a third-party species to bring about prematurely and by accident. She thought about what she would write in her report, how she would describe the coordinates that the instruments could not reliably fix, how she would explain the tower, the carvings, the grammar of an untranslatable language, the sleepers in their amber suspension. She thought about all the languages of the world and how each of them had a word for threshold, the moment between one state and another, the doorway that is neither inside nor outside, the held breath between sleeping and waking. Behind her, Pekka asked quietly if she was all right. She didn't answer right away. She watched the ice, what remained of it, and she felt the pulse, still faintly, still rhythmic, still patient, growing slowly quieter with distance, or perhaps not quieter, perhaps merely counting down. "Send a message to the Institute," she said finally. "Tell them we need to present findings. Tell them it's urgent." She paused. "Tell them it's about the ice." She did not tell them what else it was about. Not yet. There would be time. Although she thought, looking back one last time at the northern horizon, white and broken and melting at its edges in the endless, heedless Arctic summer, perhaps not as much time as they had once imagined. Far to the north, just at the rim of perception, she thought she felt the pulse quicken, just slightly, just once, like a sleeper dreaming of morning.